what I'm going to look at is Eritrea and the international media and suggest a way forward. Just to sketch very briefly the context, and it's one that I'm sure that you're all very, very familiar with, which is there is no context. There is almost no coverage of Eritrea in the international media. I mean, when I looked online on the 28th of March this year, just a day taken at random, there was a nice story about Eritrean cycling. Isn't there always a nice story about Eritrean cycling? And you guys are really good at it. Secondly, there was actually a good story, which was, well, a good, interesting story, which was about a surface-to-air missile bound for Eritrea being found in Ukraine, which I knew nothing about, I must say, until I looked. And an absolutely useless story about a Japanese Eritrean delegation to Japan, which told you nothing. By comparison with Ethiopia, of course, there were a huge number of stories because it was the air crash. But leaving aside the air crash, there were at least 3 serious stories about the Ethiopian economy, about the politics, about how things were working or not working in Ethiopia, and really some quite good coverage. So you stand in very poor comparison with Ethiopia. And it's a very familiar problem that we've all had to deal with. And it's not very difficult to see why this is the case. For a start, it's very rare for Eritrea to allow the international media into the country to speak to anybody. I mean, Al Jazeera occasionally gets a visa, the BBC does, but then they only for very short duration. And the days in which the major international news organizations, Reuters, BBC, AFP, had a correspondent based in Asmara, which did happen, are gone. They have been kicked out because they know that they find out too much. So that's a great pity. As a result, all the visiting media go through a familiar cycle. Passion for cycling, potential for tourism on the coast, archaeology and wildlife, and maybe occasionally just a little bit about repression, but mostly they don't find anywhere, so how do you report it? As a result, the coverage on Eritrea is very slight. And after all, why should you go and report Eritrea? If I was trying to sell this to an international media editor, I'd have to say, well, the country's actually at peace, so what's the story? Secondly, there isn't a great economic story. There's one mine that's of some interest. Hey, what are you going to talk to me about? There's nothing to say. So why are you paying a lot of money to go to them when somebody else could say to me, why aren't you going to Chad? Why aren't you going to the Central African Republic? They also don't get covered. So you have to fight for your coverage. Now, having said that, I think that there are things that can be done. Let me just go through them very quickly. The first is we need to watch what is actually being covered. We need to see what is happening and take account of this, because that gives you a clue as to what might happen. And they also unearth the journalists who are interested. Now, the Eritrea Focus and Europe External Policy Advisors, EPA, already do these lists, but we don't combine them. Why not? Seems a bit silly. We should be cooperating and sharing information, not duplicating each other, I think. We could also share the journalists that we know who are genuinely interested. And let me give you an example. Tom Gardner writes for The Economist and The Guardian. Very nice guy, knows his stuff. Unfortunately, he's away at this right now, which is a pity. And there are a handful of other people who do it all the time. They write about the region. With a limited number of people, we could share the information about them, and we could then basically pitch stories to them that we know about and get on with. The second thing is one needs to know about the specialist journalists, because there are people who are, let's say, take the mining sector, who specialize in mining, and Eritrea has got a mine, it's got potential for other mines, therefore they want to know about it. If you know about them, you can again pitch stories to them, and you can learn a lot from them, because it's through the specialist journalists that the generalist journalists generally get their tips for good stories. Journalists are very simple, one-celled organisms. They look for things, they gobble them up, but they don't, you've got to find something to gobble. And if you go to a specialist journalist, hey, they may know something you didn't know. So you read it and you find something and you gobble it up. It's not very complicated. So thirdly, there are African outlets, which are, of course, very important. And they have already been here, and they've been covering this conference. VOA, BBC Tigrinya, they are there. We can feed into them. They are actually hungry for news. Now that is a rarity in our environment, but we should think about it, and we can then feed things in. We need to make the news. And this is not as difficult as it sounds, but it is really important. Let me be honest with you. Another drowning in the Mediterranean is not news. It is not news. It's a tragedy. It's sad for the family. It is not news. It has happened hundreds and hundreds of times. That is not news. A demonstration outside the Eritrean embassy is not news. It may make you feel better, but it's happened hundreds of times. It is not news. News is something you've never seen before. News is what it says on the front. It is new, right? It's really simple. So let me give you an example. Vanessa, who was here earlier, staged a 17-minute silent protest for Eritreans to commemorate the 17 years that the Eritrean medium had closed down. And hey, that was a clever idea, and people picked it up. Look at that young girl who walked out of her class in Sweden, whose name I can't remember now. Exactly, her. And, immediately she made the news, because nobody had ever done it before. It was amazing. She's become an international sensation. In a couple of months she'll be gone. But for the moment she's an amazing sensation. But let me give you a couple of examples how we can do this. There was once a very small Jewish community in Eritrea. Very small. There might even be 1 or 2 Jews left. I've no idea.
One.
Okay, there's one. Great. Why don't we find that person's family in France or Italy where they are? You make the connection. Okay, London, fine. I don't know where they are. Have you sold that story to the Jewish Chronicle? No. Exactly. Why not? Jewish Chronicle is a one-celled organism. They love news about Jews. Go and find them. Tell them the story. It's really easy. They'd love you. If you want a British angle, what about Eritrea's religious groups? Bring them together, have a meeting with the bishops in the House of Lords. Right? The bishops are there to serve every religious group. Although they are only Anglicans, their duty is to serve every religious group. Get them together, somehow with the Anglican Archbishop in the House of Lords. All the Christian newspapers will pick it up. It's a good story. These are not difficult. So you're manufacturing the news, but you need to think of the angle. Do not go and have another demonstration outside the Eritrean embassy unless you're going to burn it down. Which I didn't say. Okay.
We didn't hear that.
Finally,
that bit will not be minuted.
Yes.
Because that is.
Finally, the thing you can do is to find the personality. We had Thangam here, who opened the conference. She's a personality. She's got not a huge status in British politics, but she's an MP. She's well respected. If you get her to do something, or somebody else who is interested in Eritrea, who has taken an interest, and actually we came close with Meghan Markle. Actually, she took an interest for a tiny second. We didn't grasp the opportunity. If we'd got her to say anything about Eritrea, it would have been news instantly. So there are ways of breaking through. Finally, you all know your local newspaper, your local radio station. Have you been on it? Have you even tried to be on it? Talk to them. Contact them. They're all interested. If you have a local event, they will probably want to cover it, but they don't know about it because they've never met an Eritrean. Most of them are Brits, and of course they cover the opening of a cake sale in the church, the Anglican church. Why don't you invite them to a cake sale in the Coptic church or whatever? There are lots of ways of breaking through. You just need to think of the audience, look at the outlet, and find the way through. And finally, of course, you have the other thing which you can do, which is to ask your own organizations in the locality, your political party, and I don't mind what your political party is, your trade union group, your student organization, ask them to take a stand on something that they are going to do, and maybe they have a trade union newspaper that you can get an article in. Don't see this as a glass wall that you can never penetrate. You can penetrate them. What you need to do is think through the problem and think it from the person who's trying to publish bring the material to the public that they are addressing and address it to that public. Never tell me about the international community. It doesn't exist. But your local newspaper that sells to 250 people, they really exist. The international community is a fiction. They are real. Aim for what you can really hit, where you can really make an impact, and you can do it, and build up that way. And quite frankly, I think together, if we work together and in imaginative ways, we can break through the barrier and get the Eritrean issue on the agenda. Thank you.